A few weeks ago, I made it through 2018's God of War reboot in preparation for today's video. Ultimately, I thought the story was a good time, giving us some good characters to go on a journey with, but I wasn't really sold on the gameplay loop. The combat system especially was lacking, and if you'd like to hear more of those issues, you can check out that video with the help of the card up top. It left me, at the very least, looking forward to Ragnarok. I wasn't super excited like the rest of the world was, but I did want to know how the journey I just began ended. And just to get this out there now, spoilers will be abundant throughout the entire video. You have been warned if you're looking for a recommendation. But without further ado, and because I got more games to be playing afterwards, this is God of War Ragnarok. Picking up a few years after the first title, Kratos and Atreus are preparing for the upcoming end of the world. Fimbulwinter is here, and with it, the balance of nature is getting thrown out of whack. It's not just affecting their home realm of Midgard either, the other 9 realms are seeing monsters and other dangers more frequently. Fimbulwinter is set to usher in Ragnarok, the destruction of Asgard, and seeing as how these two schmoes brought it upon everyone by killing Baldur, there are some who would like to have a word with them. Enter the Aesir. The gods and goddesses who live in Asgard rightfully fear Ragnarok and seek a way to circumvent the disaster. Thor and Odin roll up to Kratos' house asking for a truce, but if we've been taught one thing, it's that you can't trust whatever Odin says. So the father-son duo trek across the realms to find a way to deal with Ragnarok while also watching literally everyone around them deal with family trauma. The narrative is fantastic here. Dare I say it's the best thing about the game. And the crowning achievement every time is the characters and how they're portrayed throughout the story. Freya is still heartbroken and hell-bent on killing Kratos at the beginning of the game. She's apparently been trying to do this for a while now without much luck. Eventually, circumstances lead her to joining forces with our boys, culminating in one of the many touching moments this game is chock full of. After Kratos helps her break Odin's curse on her, he says that he doesn't regret saving her life, but he does regret taking that choice away from her. And it's the nuanced movements that follow which speak volumes to how these characters feel on the inside. Brock and Sindri are just... So, since the last game, Sindri and Atreus have gotten closer, Sindri actually being Atreus' confidant of sorts, helping out with tasks that he knows his father would deem too dangerous or unnecessary. But on more than one occasion, the dwarf brothers are in the line of fire when crazy things start to happen, leading them, mainly Sindri, to take more lashings than he mentally and physically can handle. It sucks too because Sindri's best friends suck him dry of his greatest treasures, he literally opens his house to them, and how does he get repaid? He gets mauled by a bear, his house gets overrun by hellwalkers, and eventually his brother is murdered in front of him by someone they let in. Sindri gets hit hard in this game, and several of these moments really gut-punched me. Brock's death was the biggest one, especially after he discovers the secret Sindri had been keeping from him. And then, when Kratos uses his own dwarven wisdom against him to raise his spirits, man, that makes his eventual end suck even more. Thor was so good, and I'm upset we didn't get to see even more of him. Every time we get a glimpse into his personal life, it's just one sad revelation after another, and right when we feel like we're going to see him move in the right direction, that's when Daddy Dearest takes him out. Which was another one that I really didn't see coming. Odin was hands down the most captivating character in the game for me. Richard Schiff plays an inspired take on Odin. I watched The Good Doctor for a little while back when I lived with my folks, and his character was always one of my favorites. But here, Odin felt so layered in every encounter he had with the other characters. Like there was always something he was leaving out, but he made it seem like he was offering you everything except the cloak off of his shoulders.
And they say I'm the bad guy.
He was so accommodating to Atreus because of this talent that he's been looking for, and when you see how well he's treated, it makes you say, well, maybe he's not so bad after all. But then you remember the stories that Mimir and Freya tell, and you see how fractured his family is and how little he seems to care. It makes for this interesting dynamic that casts doubt on every character involved, and you can only hope you're on the right side. The slimy way he calls Atreus their boy when talking to Kratos just makes him such a good villain that you can't wait to take him down. And it doesn't hurt that he made me laugh a few times.
He means to betray you.
Is that true, Loki? You a little trickster? I'm just messing around. Of course he means to betray me, huh? Heimdall.
Then we have our very own Dad of the Year, Kratos. one of the most interesting to watch protagonists I can recall in recent memory. Due to what we already know about Kratos from the previous games involving his first family, his last murder spree on Olympus, and even his upbringing as a Spartan, it's like it secretly recontextualizes everything he does. If you do know what this dude is capable of when he puts his mind to it, then you know. Giving any scene with him and say the Asgardians this extra layer of tension. The audience is waiting for either side to explode at any moment and try to rip each other's heads off. But then you have the moments where Kratos jumps to Atreus' rescue without hesitation, with that unseen baggage giving even more fuel to the more tender scenes. But even if you know nothing of the previous games, the stories still work exceptionally well, with writing that can resonate with any father or any son who knows what it's like to have these conversations with one another. When Kratos admitted that he was wrong, I teared up. When we learned that the words Kratos told Atreus at the end of the first game were actually told to him first by Faye,
"We must be better,"
I teared up. When Kratos finally lets go of his son and says that Loki can go, but Atreus stays with him, I teared up big time. That's the thing about Ragnarok. The characters we get to spend time with are the best parts about the journey for me. The revelations and arcs they go through make it all worthwhile, and everyone is given time to shine. Even Atreus' moments with Freya and Mimir after the final boss made me a little teary too.
I appreciate you so much.
I love you too, little brother.
It doesn't feel like anything was hung to dry, no plot points were skimmed over, every story gets a final page. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean the adventure was completely bulletproof. The main characters might have been treated with the utmost respect, but there were more than a few side characters that felt like they got the short end of the stick. The one that I can't help but feel this the most with is Heimdall. Atreus meets Heimdall on his first trip to Asgard, and this acts as an introduction for us as well. Heimdall is built up as this nigh unkillable pawn for Odin, so much so that Kratos has to get a special spear forged to even stand a chance against him. You know that eventually you'll have to fight him, but you expect it to be during the eventual Battle of Asgard. But instead, Heimdall just kind of shows up during a fairly unrelated quest in Vanaheim. And it's not an innocent sizing up Kratos type of encounter either. He takes him on and loses, and that's the last of Heimdall. It was a good fight, and it was cool to see the monster come out for a moment, but the timing of it felt pretty strange. Like, Heimdall was hyped up as a big threat to Kratos, but the encounter with him came a lot sooner than I expected, having the payoff feel a little lacking. This is the case for a few things. One of the major plot points is Atreus trying to fight the fate that's been laid out for his father, but Kratos never feels like he's in any danger. There's never a point in the story where I was like, ooh, this could be it for Kratos, I'm on the edge of my seat. Not even the Heimdall fight, which was supposed to be Kratos' death. It never felt like it was out of his control. Asgard itself felt like it needed more for me to really care about it getting completely annihilated. Besides getting a railroaded tour guided by Odin in the beginning, Asgard might as well have been a few rooms and a basement. It was good enough to convey what it needed to, but if you wanted me to care about the citizens when Ragnarok is happening, I needed more than a small scene where I meet one kid. During Ragnarok, I was supposed to be feeling bad for the Midgardians who were caught in the crossfire because of Odin's lies, but I don't really know them, so I don't really care. And Ragnarok itself felt a little less grand than I expected too. There were some cool moments in the final battle, and I'm not saying it didn't hit for me because, again, the moments with Sindri and the characters they actually put time into were great. But some of the bigger picture stuff was kinda lacking for me. Surtur, the big secret weapon of Ragnarok, Kratos and Atreus find him, ask him to help, he says no because he's in love, and then when Kratos turns around he goes, "Damn bro, those blades are sick, let me touch them and I'll help you out." And then he does his thing later on. Oh, and Freyr too, I didn't really get to know him all that much, so when he sacrificed himself, I was just like,
Okay.
I'm very curious to see developer interviews and behind-the-scenes diaries later on, because there are several instances in this game where things don't feel like they align as gracefully as they should, because these moments that feel unearned really make me wonder if that's how it was always supposed to be. But yeah, that's pretty much it on the narrative. I expected to like the story though, so I'm glad I wasn't disappointed there. The one thing I was hoping would get improved upon from 2018 to Ragnarok was the combat. And I'd have to say, I was pleasantly surprised this time around. Just to recap, my biggest issues with combat in the previous game was the camera and how it does a horrendous job of alerting you to enemies that are outside of your field of view, leading to deaths that don't feel like they were your fault. Balancing on higher difficulties didn't feel tested for first playthroughs, featuring tank-like basic enemies that make the first few hours of combat encounters boring to get through due to the player's limited options at that point. And Kratos' abilities didn't feel cohesive enough to encourage experimentation. The weapons and moves didn't flow well enough into each other, which led to me relying on the same combos in fights. I was scared to swap to different ones out of fear of being caught with my pants down. But miraculously, Ragnarok fixes pretty much all of my issues. I still wish we had a different camera system for this type of game, but I do think this is far better than the first attempt. The balance is extremely fair, save for a few moments where I didn't understand what needed to be done. I played on the hard difficulty again for the sake of consistency, and it surprised me how comfortable the journey was. The regular enemy encounters definitely pushed me and even killed me on more than a few occasions, but it was never anything that I truly struggled with like last time. And I even took out a few of the optional encounters at the right times in the story, and all it usually took was me changing up my strategy or just paying closer attention. And a big part of that leads into the last item I had issues with, the weapons and move swapping. This is the biggest winner as far as I'm concerned. Kratos' weapons and moves flow into each other like never before in this game. The way that the Blades of Chaos, Leviathan Axe, and Draupnir Spear work with each other is fantastic. Oh yeah, I guess I should cover the new weapon real quick. The Draupnir Spear was forged with a duplicating ring that makes for some sneaky traps if you can set it up, but it wasn't really my cup of tea. It's still a good weapon, but it didn't tickle my fancy like the other two. Its coolest feature was the explosions each of the thrown spears could cause, but yeah, not my favorite. The Blades of Chaos are now with Kratos from the very beginning, and the team used this as an opportunity to incorporate them into traversal and puzzle design, leading to them truly feeling like themselves again. They were probably my favorite of the three. I love the moves and abilities they got. The axe feels remarkably similar to its previous incarnation, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a joy to use here. The blades and the axe can now charge up one strike by holding or mashing the triangle button, and I ended up liking this move a lot more than I thought I would, and after unlocking a few skills, the one for the blades is ridiculously strong by the end of the game. The shields that Kratos can equip have been given some extra love and attention this time around. They've basically split the shield's moveset from the first game and spread it across several other shields that specialize in any particular skill or playstyle. If you're focused on blocking more, you can grab a shield with more defense and turtle behind it when things get tough. But if you're like me and are all about risking it to get the biscuit, then you might want a shield that stores up energy with every successful parry. Then when you get the chance to throw it back at the enemy, it'll make them see why it hits them so hard. The level design plays a huge role in how good these fights feel now too. A lot of verticality has been added to these arenas, and if you press the attack button at the end of any sort of traversal animation, Kratos will perform a heavy-hitting move with that weapon. One of the coolest things to do is throw the axe somewhere and then jump across a ledge while calling the axe back in midair. Damn, that never gets old. There are also a few, I guess I'll call them stage hazards, lying around in some of the arenas. Things like trees or pillars that Kratos can use to smack enemies with, or rocks that he can fling at them. They made me think of the items in Smash Bros. They do a lot of damage, and it's never not a good idea to use them on the tougher enemies. Lastly, Spartan Rage has been slightly changed up. Instead of it being an oh shit button that just makes you invulnerable and punch happy, you can choose between 3 different styles of Spartan Rage. Fury is the standard one that lets you do punchies with the enemies in exchange for your whole meter, Valor gives you a burst of health for a chunk of the meter, and Wrath allows you to target and slam a single enemy onto the battlefield with a decent amount of splash damage. If you can kill the enemy with this move, you'll gain a small amount of health back. Wrath was easily my favorite because while it's still an oh shit button to a certain degree, it required a bit more thought on when to use it as opposed to Fury. And Valor, it didn't give me back nearly as much health as it needed to for it to be worth it, so I quickly swapped it out after using it a few times. But on the whole, combat is actually flexible this time around, allowing you to mix and match weapons in and out in fun ways to make some really nutty combos. But Kratos isn't the only one that gets the spotlight this time. Atreus is playable this time around with his own completely unique way of doing things. He's still kind of a shrimp though, so.
Shut up!
He uses his bow for quick strikes when he gets close, but when he's far away, he can fire unlimited arrows and runic arrows to try to stun enemies. And when their stagger bar fills and they aren't close enough to death, he can throw them into other enemies for some crowd control. There are some cool tricks he has, like a more slippery dodge and being able to fire his arrows while dodge rolling. But other than that, he controls exactly how Kratos does. Atreus wasn't terrible to play as, but due to him only having one weapon to use and his combat arenas having far less verticality than Kratos's, I was always just wanting to get back to Kratos anytime I took control of Atreus. Doesn't mean I can't pull off some cool looking stuff with him though. There are still a few snags to combat, like having to be careful when using runic attacks because they all leave you incredibly vulnerable while using them. Some enemies have unfair tracking which can lead to frustration. But ooh, the enemies are so varied in this game. The realms are home to their own distinct flavor of enemies and they all have their own attacks and things the boys have to watch out for. And this goes double for the bosses and mini bosses especially. Now, I was in the minority when it came to the trolls in the previous game. It was inarguably excessive, don't get me wrong, but it was far from the game's biggest issue as far as I was concerned. And that joke towards the beginning of the game got a smirk out of me to be sure. But holy moly, they took that criticism to heart. The variety of the major encounters is staggering. I'd be here all day if I was to try and list them all, but my favorite major boss fights were easily the Nidhogg and its dimensional tears, and Graboda's grandmother was a really cleverly crafted fight. It says a lot when you see how much effort they're willing to put into an optional boss fight. And Odin's first phase was amazing because of how it incorporated a bit of the extended movement. He sometimes sends out damaging magic that spans 2 of the 3 chunks of terrain the battle takes place on, and you have to jump across them to avoid it. The second phase was definitely harder, but it wasn't as interesting as the one before it. It really makes for interesting combat encounters when you have to put your accumulated knowledge to the test and use strategy to take enemies out. This goes for the reworked equipment system as well. The shields aren't the only thing that have special attributes based on the one you pick up. Every piece of equipment has special perks that you'll gain by equipping it, and you can even get some extra perks if you equip all the pieces in one set, but I played the entire game without worrying about that, so it's whatever. The thing that makes this system work above all else though, is how you're not limited by the level of the equipment anymore. If you like the perk that piece of armor gives you, but it's a lower level than where you are in the game, you can upgrade it to take it all the way to endgame if you want to. Any piece of armor or equipment can be upgraded throughout the game and it deserves a big pat on the back. I got so much mileage out of this chess piece because it gives the Blades of Chaos's charging move the ability to deflect projectiles. I never got sick of that. The game just feels like it's giving the player more opportunity to make a playstyle this time around, while also giving us more toys to play with. I didn't even go off and do side quests that often either. My playthrough was pretty streamlined for the most part. I wanted to spend more time with certain characters because of how much I liked being around them, but this game is already kinda long. It really did feel like 2 games in one at points. Towards the end is when I started to get a little fatigued and wanted to keep moving on with the main story. And that was probably a little of, it was getting so good that I wanted to know what happens next, as well as they're telling me I need to go on another fetch quest that I know nothing about. I'm getting a little tired of this. The side quests were entertaining at best and gave me some cool items at worst. And it's probably so heavy on them to give you plenty of activities to tackle after you've beaten the main story. But overall, I think Ragnarok is really good. The combat is a marked improvement in every possible way. The level design and the quirks that each arena has are fun to work with, on top of the improved mechanics that Kratos is working with. It makes for fun fights that are noticeably more fair for the crowd that seeks a challenge this time around, but I would still have to say that I would play something else over Ragnarok for its combat. What we have is fantastic for a game as story focused as this, but the restricted camera placement really keeps it from being a game that's worth mastering yet again. That story though, man, is it the best part about the game, with enough tear-jerking moments to give my head whiplash and gorgeous sights throughout the 9 realms to dislocate my jaw. The cutscenes constantly had me glued to my screen. The single-shot camera also seemed to have some kinks ironed out of it too. It's not overly shaky this time around, and again, the action sequences are where this technique shines. Ragnarok is just an improvement in every way across the board. I see no reason to play the first one over Ragnarok, save for maybe catching up on the story. There are a few moments that fall flat and some that feel like they were maybe not given the time they truly needed, but the Norse duology is a keeper. As for what's next for the God of War series, only time will tell, but it's likely that we'll find ourselves controlling Atreus for an entire game next time, but we shall see. They'll need to give the boys some more utility in combat if that's going to be the case though. Shape-shifting attacks would be the way to do it if you want my opinion, but I'm not a combat designer. And as for what's next for me, we're heading to the Wild West for some vampire slaying action. Keep an eye out for my review of Evil West coming soon. I've already played through the game and most of the script is already written, so hopefully you won't have to wait too long for that one. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.